Hi, I'm Nathan, and this is Soul, a sci-fi, card-based tabletop role-playing game that I've been working on for the last 8 years. In Soul's current form, it has 431 cards, with 21 classes, multiple playable races, and over 200 items. I've sunk a lot of time and effort into this game, and this is me starting over. But before all that, let me give you some context as to what this game even is, why we made it, and what to expect from this Devlog series as a whole. Back in 2015, me and my friend Kyle were debating on making a web series called The Crew. Both of us have made a lot of movies in high school, along with going to college for film, so it kind of made sense. The Crew was planned to be a sci-fi series that would show the stories of the working class people on a starship, rather than, a captain and their high-ranking officers. Think something like Star Trek Lower Decks or even Firefly. Now, this was a cool idea and all, but we didn't really have the resources to achieve it, nor were we even in the same state at the time. Concurrent to that, I've been watching a lot of U-Realms live. For the unfamiliar, U-Realms is a tabletop RPG made by the same guy who did the Unforgotten Realms cartoons back in 2009 on The Escapist. The game was like a simplified card-based Dungeons & Dragons. I saw him and his friend making content and stories with this game, and I thought, why can't I do that? I mean, I've been making games ever since I was a kid. Granted, a lot of them weren't very good, and even if they were, no one would really know because they were filled with dyslexic acronyms for rules, so no one would really be able to play them. I mean, what does MKUKU backwards 1 even mean? But I was older now, and I felt like I could actually do it. I suggested the idea to my friend Kyle. He agreed we should do it, and we got to work on making the game. Soul is a card-based tabletop role-playing game. Let's break that down slightly. Role-playing game. There are a lot of kinds of role-playing games these days, but this one is most similar to the original role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons. If you've never played a game like D&D before, the basics is this. One player, the game master, controls the game and crafts the story, while the other players, player characters, play the characters in the story. Tabletop. It's played on a table, like a board game, not a video game. Except ours is hosted on Tabletop Simulator, which is a video game for hosting board games. So yeah, card-based. The characters in this game are made up of cards. The race, the class, abilities, items, all determined by what cards they possess. Here's a quick example of how the game actually works. First is character creation, which starts with a roll of the stat dice, then followed by the player selecting their race and sub-race. This is usually the type of creature they are for the race, and planet of origin for their subrace. Then the player will select from one of the classes and choose 3 of 5 abilities that belong to that class. Generally, a player will then choose their traits based on their stats. Each player gets 1 trait based on each stat type: strength, agility, endurance, and intelligence. Once you have all those selected, all that's left to do is to buy your items and get playing. To play the game, you'll have a tile representing your character and a 20-sided dice to perform actions. High rolls are successes, and low rolls are failures. The Game Master then weaves a story for the players, as they act as their characters, and good time is had by all. However, that's where the problem lies. Okay, so I've sunk in a lot of time and effort into this game, so why start over? Well, the game just isn't an ideal platform to tell stories. It ended up being more of a combat simulator, which is totally fine, but even if that was what I was going for, it was still lacking in some respects. Combat felt too rigid, and roleplay elements generally felt separate from the game itself. This made me want to rework everything, which I did, but I'm doing it again. Because even after multiple full reworks of the game, I've struggled to make the game exactly how I wanted to, with more role-playing focused systems, with a combat system that doesn't feel stale and repetitive, with the same actions being taken over and over again, and combat that feels impactful to the story and flows in and out of roleplay. That's why in this series, I'm going to be going through all the previous iterations of the game and dissecting them. I'll be talking in depth about the game and hopefully shedding some light on what makes a good and bad role playing game. And finally, I will be taking that knowledge that we learned together and make a new version of the game. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one.